everybody. Hope you can hear me okay. Welcome back. So this is the family and household section, which is one of the options that are available in paper 2. I'm glad everybody enjoyed the education one that I did. It was really nice to see your lovely feedback for it. So I'm just going to jump in now and get on with it. So firstly, looking at functionalism. The family, according to functionalists, is essentially a vital organ maintaining the body of society. So looking back at the organic analogy, that is really popular with functionalists in explaining how society works. So Murdoch, functions of the family, you've got sexual, providing a stable sexual relationship for adults, reproduction, new members of society, socialization, so that's the primary socialization side of the family, so teaching children norms and values of society so that they integrate properly when they go to school and things. And then economic function as well, so just like providing for all the family members, ensuring that they're healthy and things. And then according to Parsons, he also said that socialization was an important function. And at the same time, you had the stabilization of adult personalities, so the emotional relationships that parents give to each other, like in terms of support and security, allowing them to cope with wider society. Marxism. The family performs essential functions for society which benefit the bourgeoisie and the economy but disadvantage the proletariat. So according to Marxists, the functions of the family and inheritance of wealth by Engels. So the middle class stay rich, but like the ruling class stay rich because of passing money on through inheritance after people die. Cushioning effect by Zaretsky. Provides a haven to comfort those who are oppressed, and it also just relieves their frustration from daily life, so allows for the bourgeoisie to just keep oppressing the proletariat. The family is seen as a unit of consumption as they develop the goods and then they buy it. They buy what is developed by the capitalist industry. And then you've obviously got socialization again by Althusser, passing on dominant ideology to children, allowing for exploitation to continue in the next generation. Feminism, they emphasize the harmful effects of family life upon women, as it just continues, as it passes on from the gender inequality from society into the family, into the household. So liberal feminists look at the fact that culture and norms are reinforced by the family, but the family is only sexist because it supports and follows mainstream culture. So if mainstream culture was to change, then obviously the family would no longer be sexist. And then social change is possible if, like, there is pressure put on legal systems and governments to integrate new policies and things that change how the culture sees women and sees their role in society. Marxist feminists, the exploitation of women is essential to capitalism, as they help produce and care for the next generation of workers at almost no cost to capitalism. So yeah, essentially they help. Women are really useful when it comes to capitalism because they help raise and look after and make sure that the next generation of workers are really healthy. And obviously capitalism benefit from that without actually really having to do anything. And then radical feminists, housework exploits women, but they focus on a patriarchal society rather than capitalism like the Marxist feminists do. And then Delphi and Leonard explained that the family is a patriarchal institution where women do most of the work whilst men get most of the benefit. So looking at postmodernism, so you've got Giddens explaining that people have more choice in terms of relationships and families nowadays, And then there's obviously the pure relationships that are now in a postmodern society, which are relationships that last as long as they are happy. But this then so people aren't afraid to get divorced or anything. But that has led to a rise of cohabitation and serial monogamy. And then Stacey explained that women have more freedom now to shape the family arrangements to suit their needs and be freed from oppression. Which obviously means that there's going to be a lot more single mothers, lone parent families out in society. And then obviously it's led to the introduction of the divorce extended family, where members of two families have been connected via a divorce. Then looking at the sociology of personal life. So this was sort of developed by Smart, who argued that the family is not in decline, it's just more diverse and complex than before. That it's not just a simple nuclear family, it's like the family is still very, very important in society, it's just not the nuclear family, it's so many other types of families now. And it also looks like the relationships that are not necessarily classed as family, so like the relationships you have with pets, obviously important, but you wouldn't not everyone classes a family dog as, you know, an actual family member. Many people literally purely just see it as a pet. So social policy. So you just got the perspective views at the top there. Also, I hope, because I've had to cram some things into just one PowerPoint slide, but I hope that the writing is still big enough for you to be able to read it clearly. So anyway, so functionalism. See policies being good because they help families function more efficiently. New right. Policies aren't that great because they undermine the self-reliant family, which obviously leads on to like Murray's underclass. Marxism policies provide ideological legitimation of capitalism. So obviously policies help reinforce the ideology for capitalism and keep it running. And then liberal feminism led to greater gender equality, and then radical feminism like don't see it as just being a simple fix to gender inequalities. There needs to be more done than just introducing something. And then actually looking at the policies that are introduced. So the 1980s and 1990s conservative reform the relationship between society and the state, influenced by the new right. And aim to reduce control over lives and enforce rights and responsibilities, because obviously as it was influenced by the new right, they don't want to make people reliant on the state, they want people to be independent, so which allowed for the 1984 Divorce Act, allowing couples to divorce within 1 year of marriage. And then moving on to the 1997 to 2010 new Labour government, they wanted to support other types of families aside from the nuclear. So you've got 2005 civil partnerships, and then also the 1998 supporting families document introduced a lot of different things into family life. So you've got financial support, so child benefit and EMA, education maintenance allowance, and advice and support for parents, family-friendly employment arrangements, and then obviously trying to find solutions for truancy and teenage pregnancy. Moving on to the 2010 coalition government. Sorry, I forgot to put in 2015. It's from 2010 to 2015 that we had the coalition government. So they aim to reduce family breakdown and get more people in the workplace. So they focused on domestic violence disclosure scheme. Which essentially is a person is allowed to go to the police and ask for a domestic violence record on someone they're possibly interested in seeing, which can now be disclosed to someone. So that is, and then you go on to the 2012 Welfare Reform Act, which introduced universal credits. So instead of having loads of different credits and stuff, like benefits and stuff, you just had this simple universal credit that everyone could apply for, which also helped to cap the amount available to people, which sort of fits in with the new right thinking. And then obviously the bedroom tax. So if you had a spare bedroom in your house that no one was using, you'd have to pay tax on it, which sort of meant lots of people were trying to get people to move into their rooms, and also stop people from living in houses that were far too big for them. Then in 2013, gay marriage was legalised, and then 2014, the Children and Families Act protected vulnerable children and gave choice over who could take parental leave. And then other important policies which didn't really fit in with either of these governments is that the 1967 legislation of contraceptive pill, 1975 Employment Protection Act allowing for paid maternity leave, and then obviously the 1970 Equal Pay Act, although obviously that is still very much a work in progress today. So family diversity, so you've got Rappaport, 5 types of family diversity, so you can think of it as clogs. So you've got cultural diversity, which is differences arising from different cultures with varying norms and values. Life course, so diversity caused by the different stages people have reached in their life, which sort of varies by age and things, and like whether they've got a career, whether they've just gotten married and had children really early on, like in their 20s. Moving on to organisational diversity, so that's just different ways in the families are actually structured. Generational, so depending on what historical period that the family lived through. So many of our grandparents at the moment will have gone through World War II, or at least lived through it as a child, which obviously influences their views on the family and how they want their family to be. And then obviously class is different views of families are held in different parts of society. So there's sort of varying various ways that the family is actually that change the way that the family is diverse. And then causes for family diversity is changing patterns. So obviously more divorce, more cohabiting and things, less marriage. Obviously there's also the increase of people using sperm donors, so rather than actually having a partner in the first place to have the child with, many just use sperm donors to have children when they want in their life. And then postmodernisation, diversity is a reflection of a more diverse society. Economic factors, increasing wealth means more people are able to live alone, and those who can't have multi-generational families, so those in the middle class usually have only a few children, are more likely to feel able enough to go off and be in a lone parent family, whereas those who are poor, just think of it as the family in the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory story. So all of 8 people crammed into one bed essentially. And then changing roles, so obviously women going into careers so that they don't actually have to rely on a male breadwinner. Policies, so the 1969 Divorce Act, 1972 Equal Pay Act, then obviously the welfare benefits, although the welfare benefits have led to an underclass and more teenage pregnancy, so that's sort of led to more diversity in the fact that before they came about, not many people actually got pregnant as teenagers. And then obviously late modernism, people are forced into certain situations due to structural changes. So people don't actually choose to live in a more diverse family. It's just something that's forced upon them because of the way society is structured and how it's changing. Perspective ideas on this. So you've got Parsons, Functionalism, who sort of described the functional fit theory. So the family changes and its functions change to suit society as that changes. Murray from the New Right. So the nuclear family is under threat due to social policies that change processes in the family, and obviously digging into his underclass theory more in terms of benefits and things, and like universal credits. Postmodernist, diversity is the new norm in society, and obviously people have more freedom and only remain in a relationship as long as they actually need to. They do not feel forced to stay in a relationship because they have children or anything. Stacey, feminist. Women can now create families to suit their needs. So rather than just a woman staying in any family in order to have money, because they now have their own careers, they need it to fit around their lifestyle, which is what many do, which has led to the new divorce extended families. And a change, and from Chester's point of view, a change has been made to a neo-conventional family. So we've gone from obviously the conventional family, which is essentially the cereal packet family, the nuclear family, to the neo-conventional family, which is more suited to contemporary society, where couples are dual earners and involves conjugal roles, where everyone shares each couple shares household chores. So moving on to the domestic division of labour, men traditionally have an instrumental role, whilst women have the expressive role. Wilmot and Young, who looked at the March of Progress view, so the early industrial families based on segregated roles, but after the Industrial Revolution, gender equality became more part of society, so roles were more equal and democratic. Reasons for roles changing. It's very bland on this slide, but I feel like it's something we see so much in real life today that you could probably really work on it yourself. So more women going into work, paternity leave, feminism, and then technology lessens housework. So obviously you've got so many things, like you've got those hoovers nowadays that sort of just go around hoovering the house for you. And then has the change been exaggerated in terms of the domestic division of labour? So you could say it hasn't been exaggerated because more women are now in full-time work, so families are more symmetrical. As from 1971 to 2013, the amount of women aged 16 to 64 in work has increased by 14%, which is really, really good. And it obviously shows that the change in roles hasn't actually been exaggerated, but there is a lot more evidence to show that it has possibly been. So Bayfield, even in dual career families, women had major responsibility for domestic tasks. Rappaport, career women were still viewed as wives and mothers by their husbands, their partners. Hochschild, full-time working women spent 3 hours a day doing housework, whilst men only spent 17 minutes doing housework a day, which is a very, very big difference. And then lastly, Oakley studied 40 housewives and found they're actually just as alienated by their work within the household and things as factory workers, and they also had similar coping strategies. Consequences of inequality. So the impact of family life, of career and job prospects. So before becoming a mother, job prospects are very high, but obviously the moment you become a mother, obviously after you become a mother, companies start to see you more as a risk to hire, because for one, you may go on to have more children, or they think you may take too much time off if your children fall ill and things. So obviously this just impacts really negatively their future prospects for work. And then the impact of the triple shift on women, so they have little time to spare, so they can't do any leisurely activities and become just very secluded from society, from the real world. And then this seclusion can lead to depression and loneliness. So perspectives on the causes of domestic violence. So radical feminists Dobash and Dobash, marriage legitimizes violence against women, and husbands are often provoked by challenges to their authority. So obviously with the increase of women going to work, they feel like they have more of a role in the family and have a lot more confidence to stand up for their husbands, which obviously traditionally men do not like. And a lot of men now, even nowadays, still have that very traditional view that they are the man of the house. They should not be challenged. The new right, domestic violence only occurs in dysfunctional family, but they focused it more on the actual working class families, so they didn't really see middle class families as being dysfunctional enough for domestic violence to occur. Both postmodernist Giddens, caused by emotional intensity of family life and the increasing isolation of nuclear families. And then Marxist feminists, Wilkinson, they just saw domestic violence as a result of stress caused by social inequalities due to capitalism and the oppression of work. Cohabitation, marriage, and divorce. So, causes of the trends. I've tried to put a little graph in there, but it's not very clear. That's just the divorces and marriages. I couldn't seem to find a graph or very good actual statistics on cohabitation. So I'm really sorry about that. But what I like about having the graph there is sort of provides a visual representation of actually what's happening. But then obviously the causes of these trends are changing roles of women. So less women want to get married, and more likely to get divorced. Secularization, so there is less religious influence put onto the family, onto marriage. Sorry. So when people don't feel like they have to stay married just because of their religion, they're quite happy to get divorced. There's changes in society's norms. So obviously, there used to be a huge stigma around divorce, but obviously that is no longer. Legal changes, so obviously, um, divorces are allowed a lot sooner now than they used to be. Economic causes, postmodern reasons, so there's no longer a single family structure in society, and changing the family make it less essential for society to function properly. And then obviously positive impacts of these changes is greater gender equality, but then also the family is still very, very important for the proper development of children. So not having that solid family there with both parents can increase likelihood of turning to crime, or not, at least not doing very well in education. Childbearing. So as you can see, the total fertility rate from 1900 to 2012 has decreased. So has birth rate, so has family size, and so has household size. And then reasons for this is the increased availability of contraception. More women going into education don't feel like they have to actually have children or have as many. The role of women changing as well, so that's the same sort of point. So obviously they're focusing more on their careers rather than just being a housewife and having children. Infant mortality rate. So as infant mortality rate decreases, it isn't as necessary for people to have 7 children in the hope that 2 or 3 of them survive past the age of 1. And then obviously changing values. So women, it's not stigmatized anymore if women don't have children. And then obviously economic factors. So the impact of these changed fertility rates: a reduction in labour force. So obviously less children within the next generation of workers. It could be argued that there is an increasing dependency ratio, because obviously as there is less children being born, as they get older, as the parents get older, there is less people to actually look after them, if that makes sense. And then obviously immigration is changing. And then the sort of downside to these changing fertility rates, so the growth of the beanpole family, which is not the best in terms of the dependency ratio and the aging population. Voluntary childness, reduced workforce, and no one to leave inheritance to, and then which affects capitalism a lot. And then obviously the decrease in full-time mothers impacts the development of a child and how they perform in education, which means that whilst it doesn't impact the size of the workforce, it impacts the actual quality of them. Looking at childhood as a social construction. So I've tried to colour code it towards the arrow that I've got at the top. So is childhood a social construction? No. We've got separateness by Pilcher. Socially separated, they have a different social status to adults. They're dressed differently to adults, so physical immaturity, and children have their own sort of products, they have their own sections in stores. And then obviously psychological immaturity, so they require protection from the world. There's obviously, if you just drop the child into society at the age of at the moment they were born, they would not be able to cope. And then obviously looking at James and Prout, their dominant framework. So children have simple amoral frameworks, so they have no or limited morals, whereas adults have a complex moral, so which means they have morals that greatly impact behaviour and attitudes. In the middle of the argument, you've got the sensible analytical approach, which says that the social construction of childhood depends on the actual age of the child. For example, so infants are naturally dependent, so obviously that is not a social construction. But from age 5 onwards, social construction is more plausible as children become less dependent on their parents and more independent. But obviously, the way society is structured, it can, so obviously legally people are not classed as an adult until they're over 18, even though they are very clearly independent. And then looking at the yes side of the argument, so you've got cultural relativity. So obviously childhood experience varied by culture, and Wag argues there's no single universal childhood, so it isn't natural, it shouldn't be distinguished from more biological immaturity. And then historical relativity, so the experience of childhood has aged over time. So Aries showed in medieval times children did not exist as a separate status. Once they were physically able and they were able to actually do stuff for themselves, even if it's just small things, they would go to work or do housework if they're a woman or a girl. And obviously even back in even in like the during the World War and stuff, children were very much sent to work. The status of children. So this, you're looking at the March of Progress view. Children's lives are far better today. So for example, examples of this is that work is now restricted to 25 hours a week for 13 to 14-year-olds. School is now compulsory to 18 years of age, and the rights of children is more central to society, so child protection laws and things are more central. And obviously there's a lot more hatred towards like child abuse and things and child sexual molestation. And then obviously parents spending more time and money on children, so the parental bond is better and they have a better quality of life. Moving on to the conflict view, so they argue that the March of Progress view is incorrect as society is based on conflict and inequality. So they said that the in terms of intra-child conflict, for nationality, 90% of the world's low birth rates are in developing countries, which is linked to delayed physical and intellectual development. Hillman focused on gender, so boys are more likely to be allowed to cross or cycle on roads, use buses and go out after dark unaccompanied, whereas obviously girls were all getting very, very, very treated differently, and they would, like, even now many people are not, girls are not trusted to go out after dark. Brannan looked at ethnicity. A study of 15 to 16-year-olds found Asian parents were more likely to be strict towards their daughters. And then obviously, which that Brannan study could also be fairly linked to gender. And then class and Woodruff. Children of unskilled manual workers are over 3 times more likely to suffer from hyperactivity than children of professionals. And then looking at the child liberationist view, children should be freed from adult control, which takes place via neglect and abuse, controlling where they can do something, where they can't, so control over their space, control over their time, telling them when to wake up, eat, and go to bed, and then obviously control over their body, telling them how to sit, walk, and run, and telling them what to do, essentially. The future of childhood, so Postman argued that developed the disappearing childhood thesis. So essentially, the gap between childhood and adulthood is narrowing, specifically because children, now have the same rights as adults, with similar clothing, and children committing adult crimes, which includes murder, although obviously any crimes committed before the age of 10 are not criminally prosecuted, although the child will go through counselling and therapy and things in the hope it won't happen again. And then childhood first emerged with mass literacy, because obviously adults were defined as those who can read and children who couldn't read. But obviously that is becoming less defined of a gap, because obviously more and more children are being able to read now. And then the toxic childhood thesis by Palmer. So she suggested a toxic mix of technological and cultural changes is having a negative impact on the development of children growing up in a contemporary society. So the decline of outdoor play, commercialization of childhood. So obviously you get all these children's toys adverts all over the TV in the hope that all the children will be exploited and they'll want to buy the toys that they're advertising. Obviously the constant need to be in school till 18 means that obviously these children are less independent. The decline of listening, language and communication skills has led to reduced attention spans, screen saturation, so obviously spending a lot of time on computers and phones, which we're all doing right now, so really bit ironic really. But and then obviously the tests, targets and education have increased anxiety, so obviously children nowadays have a lot more mental health issues than they used to. And then continuing the future of childhood, so you've got the idea of the universal childhood. So the Western notion of childhood is spreading around the world, so everyone has a similar sort of childhood experience. Campaigns for universal education, charities focusing on street children, preventing child labour, and obviously globalised TV and media, which means that everybody sort of goes through the same sort of things, experiences the same sort of things. And then new sociology of children, which is favoured by child liberationists. So Miles argued that children are treated as socialisation projects and focus on and there needs to be a focus on childhood from a child's perspective. Also, children are active agents in creating their own childhood, which is often very, very ignored, and it is best if unstructured interviews are used to study children. So looking at demographics, so birth rate, I'm not going to define them because obviously the definitions are on the screen for you to read, but birth rate, people having children later on or no children. So the birth rate is going down, and then obviously the reduced infant mortality rate means that people are having less children, which impacts society in a way that there's a smaller workforce, an aging population, and as a result of aging population, increased dependency ratio, which I spoke about before. Total fertility rate is decreasing, again for the same reasons as birth rate decreasing, and is leading to increased beanpole families and increased dependency ratio. Death rate is decreasing due to better healthcare, and along with that comes a longer life expectancy, but obviously then there is the issues of aging population and possible overpopulation, which with the increase of immigration to the United Kingdom is becoming more of a real issue. And then the infant mortality rate is decreasing because of better healthcare, and obviously because less babies are actually being conceived in the first place for them to pass away by the age of 1. And then obviously this leads to increased dependency ratio in the short term, but reduces it in the long term. And then the life expectancy is increasing due to better healthcare, and then so you've got a larger extended and beanpole family as a result, and increasing dependency ratio. Also, I would just like to mention that I've put these bottom arrows in red and the top ones in green. That is not to say that they're like good and bad, it's just I wanted a colour difference so that you could actually recognise what was going up and what was going down. And then obviously aging population, better healthcare, longer life expectancy is causing that, which has led to an increasing dependency ratio, and obviously more state pensions are required, so there's a lot less spare government money to be put into other areas. And then continued, so this is more focusing on immigration, and globalization. So you've got why do people emigrate from the UK? So why do they move to other countries from the UK? So financial crisis over here. So we had the what's the word? Yeah, we had the recession in, like, I think it was 2009. Retirement, obviously, like a lot of people like retiring to like Spain and things. For work, they might move across for work, and obviously family abroad. Which has led to a less skilled population, because obviously a lot of skilled people will be moving to other countries for better paid jobs, newer jobs and things, and then obviously a reduced aging population, which is not necessarily a bad thing. And then why do people immigrate to the UK? So why do they move from other countries into the UK? So financial stability. So if they come from a very poor country, they'll come over here. And then looking at family and work as well, they may earn money over here, live in poor housing over here, so they can save as much money as they can and send it to their family at home in another country. And then what impact has this immigration had on the UK? So this immigration has led to increasing population, possibly leading to overpopulation, increased diversity of religious and cultures, so the introduction of religious pluralism. Some of you may know what that is, some of you may not. So essentially, religious pluralism is when there's in one culture there is multiple religions like all living in a area together. And then there's increased pressure on the welfare state and housing, and also on the NHS, local schools and social services. Globalization, what impact has globalization had on families in the UK? So it's led to increased family diversity. Shift in manufacturing abroad means less jobs available in the UK. The globalization of the media is causing toxic childhood, as noted by Palmer, and more paranoid parents. And then obviously more financial crises, including divorce and family diversity. And then I'm not going to read these trends out, but there's just some data figures in there for you of the biggest demographic trends in the last 100 years. So looking at population, so overall population, total fertility rate, birth rate, net migration, life expectancy, and infant mortality rate.